All right, so we're going to talk about it. Well, I'll back up just a little bit. Glenn and I had been exchanging emails. I think it was back in like March. You had reached out to me, seeing if I was early in the year, if I was interested in speaking at Data Nerds, and I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to go learn something myself and then share it. But I didn't really know what to talk about. It's for me, it's usually just the talks that I've done in the past are always about like things that I'm currently working on or really interested in, and so I wasn't really sure. And I've had I'll show an intro slide here in a second, and I've had kids, and ever since having children, it's a lot harder to get out to events and doing things. And they're still young children, but starting to grow up some, and so I'm starting to see the light or coming out of the haze a little bit of having kids. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. But I mean, I'm really in the thick of it. But anyways, we finally kind of nailed it down maybe 2 months ago or so. I think we said, okay, I'll speak, and I'll speak on this, and just kind of picked the topic. So I then feverishly learned it and started getting more and more into it, and I've really enjoyed it. So I hope you guys enjoy this and ask questions along the way. I'll do my best to answer them, and we'll just kind of go along with it. So yeah, we're going to talk about building agentic apps, and that's something that we're currently interested in right now at HealthTrust, where I work, of where can we take the things that we're doing today and use agents or LLMs to enhance the work that we're doing. We spend a lot of time reviewing items. So let me back up just a second, explain a little bit about HealthTrust and what we do. We're what's called a GPO, group purchasing organization. So we take hospital systems or our members. They are buying a lot of things. So anytime you go into a doctor's office, right, think about all the stuff you see, like all the tongue depressors, the table that you sit on, just literally anything they use, the IV bags, the stand that the IV bag is on, the curtains, all of it. Hospitals are buying that stuff all the time, and what we do is we aggregate all of their purchasing, and we take that to suppliers, and we say, hey, we've got these members buying all this stuff. We want them to buy it from you. What kind of deal can we make? What kind of volume discount can we get with that supplier? So we're real interested in about the medical items that people are purchasing. And there's a lot of nuance to that, but then we're getting data from all these members. We're bringing it in. We're seeing what people are buying, and there's a lot of challenges with that because people call things different things, and we got to master it to the same thing so that we can do real analytics on it and actually get some understanding of how items are being purchased across a membership. And we have people that try to master those items, and they need to figure out what those are. And so they're doing a lot of Googling, just trying to find the items, right, and see what's about. So if we can use an LLM to maybe speed up that process and bring some of that information, can I maybe break apart the description of an item into its attributes so I can then have more information about an item? That's a lot of the kind of stuff that we're interested in, as well as trying to compare two items. So if I have this item and that item, it's made by two different people, but it's really, they're both screws that go into a hip. It's maybe something that can be interchanged. If one's not available, or maybe one's not on a contract with HealthTrust, but one is, can I get the member to change their spending? So that's a lot of kind of why we're interested in this stuff, and kind of the basis for looking into this stuff. The demo I'll give at the end has nothing to do with healthcare. It's all about stocks, but it'll be fun. So the subtitle, creating an awkward silence with your mother-in-law. Last night I was having dinner with my mother-in-law. She said, "What's your talk about?" And I said, "I'm about building agentic applications. So you have this app," and I kind of explained it, and she just, uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, so Sarah said, blah, 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 turns to my wife, and just that was the end of the conversation. So it was great. It was a lot of fun. A little bit more about me. That's me with my family. Like I said, I have 3 small children. They're a lot of fun to be with. And getting a picture, this was the only picture we have as a family, because it's usually my wife or I are not in the picture because one of us is taking the picture. And of course, Carter, our middle child there, has his eyes closed, and Sylvia's walking away. And, she'll try to find a table to dance on at some point. So that's always fun. I'm a Nashville native. I was born and raised here in Nashville, grew up in Antioch, and then went to Tennessee Tech, got a degree in computer science, came back, and got married, have kids. I live in Mount Juliet now. So life's great. I'm the director of data science and engineering at HealthTrust. I've been there for 4 years. Prior to that, I was with a little company called Lazy Dog Restaurants, if you've ever heard of them. Closest one's in Atlanta. They're based out of California. They were a client of mine when I consulted for a few years before that, and that's what I did for a number of years before I was there. So consulted, building analytic systems, helping teams or companies that had maybe small to no IT build data warehouses, use Power BI to then get insight into their business, help them run more efficiently. So I've been doing that for almost 15 years. That's just a little bit about me. I have no hobbies because I have children. You're looking at my hobby right now. Anyways, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about building agentic applications, but how we break that down. We're going to talk first, I'm going to baseline kind of our knowledge around kind of models and agents and kind of a lot of the newness that's out there and just make sure we're all on the same page. And then we're going to talk about Microsoft Foundry as kind of the tool for kind of hosting these agents, and then how can we use them? What capabilities are out there with Foundry? We'll kind of hit that at a very high level. And then we'll also talk about some of the software development kits that are out there that you can use to interface with an agent that you've hosted in Foundry. And so we'll look at two in particular. And then with this, I have a demo of a stock analyzer app. So the idea is that I can put a portfolio of stocks together, and I'll have an agent go and give me a bull and bear case on each stock. So I get some information on, hey, why would I want to invest in the stock? What headwinds might this stock be facing? What things should I watch out for if I'm going to make an investment? And then I have a research page as well where you can kind of prompt it for a topic, and it'll go find stocks, kind of in that subject area. So just some very simple examples. Hopefully that kind of gets the idea across. So if I didn't say it before, feel free to stop me and ask questions along the way. More than happy to take a pause and answer them as we go. So first, let's kind of ground ourselves on a model. So the first thing I'll talk about real quickly is large language models. I think we're all fairly familiar with these at this point, and they've been out for a few years now. But they're essentially just a language model that generates text based on a user prompt, right? So you can prompt it and it can kind of answer your question or summarize information, but the model itself only knows what it's been trained on. And so if you remember back when ChatGPT first really hit the scene, one of the big things was, I only know things up to September of last year. And you're like, well, I can't do anything with this. So what did people start doing? They started bringing their own data and injecting it into their prompts. And those are sort of, you call that a RAG application. If you haven't heard of that, that's a retrieval augmented generation app. And the idea there is that I have some data store of information, and I want to go first collect any relevant documents from that data store first and take that and then hand that in my prompt to the LLM, and then maybe it summarizes that information and hands it back to me so it has some context about the question that I'm trying to ask. Another thing to know is that these models are stateless. So every time you start a conversation with them, it's brand new. It doesn't remember who you are, doesn't know anything about you. It's kind of like the guy from 50 First Dates, if you remember that movie, where the guy goes to the hospital and every 5 minutes, like the conversation starts over. That's me when I get home with my wife. So, it's hard. The jokes will keep going, I promise. They'll get better, maybe. Is that how old your kids are? How old Anyway, so a couple of model types I want to talk about too. You'll hear this a lot, like just reading or listening to podcasts or things. People talk about frontier models. That's going to be like your Claudes from Anthropic or your ChatGPT models. You can maybe throw Gemini in there as well. They're the most cutting edge models available. They're also the more expensive. Megan's shaking her head. No, Gemini's not it. They're the most expensive ones out there on the market. Open weight models are another kind of class of models where the model itself is made available publicly. Like you can go and pull that model down. Some might have a usage license associated with it, but you can take that, run it on your own hardware, do whatever you want with it. Whereas things like ChatGPT and Claude, you're hitting a service for those. You're not going to run that on your own machine. And the open weight models, some that are out there, you'll hear about things like distilling, where you're trying to take maybe a prompt, send it to ChatGPT first or Claude, have it produce the output, and then you're refining your model based on that output, and you're sort of trying to gain the same amount of performance from that other model. And that's how some of these are made. So there's just some interesting concepts that are out there. But the thing about open weight models, the weights are available, and you can use that model. You don't have to worry about that model version kind of going away because you're running it yourself. But the code that built that model is not available. So it's not really open source, it's open weight. It's just a little bit different. There are open source models out there, but the ones that I've seen and am familiar with, they're more for like educational purposes to teach you how to build a model and how to train it. So there's also not on this slide, in these models, another kind of piece that you don't really see out there is what data was used to train the model, right? So there's some training data set where it's basically reading the internet. So that's sort of how these things are constructed and built. But then there's also a set of post-training that's happening where you've got that first base model, but then you kind of got to teach it how to think or how to interact in maybe a chat form. And that's a whole nother series of building your own training data for that. So totally different. But that's kind of the just core concept idea of a model. That's kind of the key piece of what we're going to talk about. All right, so now you start hearing about these things called agents, and that's like a totally different ball game, it sounds like. But really, it's a model with a wrapper around it. The models today, they're trained. I mentioned post-training just a second ago. They're trained now to where you are essentially training the model, post-training the model to deconstruct what you're trying to ask it, and it breaks it down into tasks, and then it goes and tries to execute those tasks. And what's interesting now is that in the post-training, they've enabled these models, or they've trained these models to be able to say, hey, here's a set of tools that are at my disposal. I can now, here's how I might be able to call that tool, take the output of that tool and inject it back into the prompt and use that as part of the output, if that makes sense. So a simple example of a tool might be web search, right? The agent might decide, hey, I can go do a web search on this particular topic. I can go take that information, bring it back in, and then summarize it. So now if I'm trying to build like that RAG application, right, I don't have to go do that information retrieval first and construct the prompt. The agent can kind of decide to do that itself. I think the interesting thing about this, though, the models, while they have like these new capabilities, they're still just predicting the next token or the next piece of text, right? So if you're ever on your phone and you're texting and you can see like, hey, here are the next like 2 or 3 words that you might try to use next. That's kind of what the LLM's doing. It's just spitting out the next word. It's just like that on steroids, right? So that's just one way to think about it. So we talked about these tools like web search. The model itself like doesn't actually have the ability to go call a tool or do anything. That's why we have this thing called an agent harness that we're wrapping around a model. And so what happens is the model is going to spit out a token that says, hey, I want to use this tool. And the tool is going to say something like do a web search and web search on this particular string. And then the agent harness is going to actually take that action and it's going to say, okay, let's go and run that web search. I'm going to stop generating new tokens. I'm going to run the web search. I'm going to bring back that information. I'm going to inject it into the prompt for the next token to spit out, right? So I got some examples to help kind of explain that, and I'll stop waving my hands around. So any questions on that before I continue? There's a lot of me just talking. All right. Cool. All right, so I stole this picture from the Microsoft documentation because I had one that I generated from Gemini and it sucked, so I just wasn't going to use it. And you can tell like when people generate like diagrams out of a model for whatever reason, they're just super busy. Anyways, so as I was saying earlier, you can start. Can I use my mouse? Yeah, okay, this will work. Well, hang on, here we go. So we can start with a user. They're going to prompt a message, right? And it's going to go to the agent. The agent's going to pick that up, and it's going to start. It's going to start pinging the LLM for the next token. But what it's going to also do is the agent knows, hey, I've got all these tools, I've got all these capabilities at my disposal, and I'm going to construct the prompt, the thing that I'm going to actually send down to the LLM. It's going to tell it about all these capabilities that it has. And so it's going to send the request, the prompt, all this context down to the LLM. The LLM is going to start generating tokens. It's going to start pulling that back. And then at some point, it may say, and this is like this probabilistic thing, right? You don't know if the agent's going to actually decide to do it or not. It's going to say, hey, I need to make that tool call. Oh, okay. The agent is going to realize, oh, okay, you're asking me to do a tool call. And it's going to jump back. It's going to say, okay, we got to go call this tool. How do I call that? Well, maybe it's a simple tool that's, I'll show, I don't have a good example of it, but with Microsoft Agent Framework, you can have your own custom tool built in. And so maybe it just jumps and calls that tool. Maybe it's over an MCP server. Model Context Protocol is what MCP stands for. I've never tried to build one of those, but it's just a way to access additional functionality and have your LLM know how to talk to it because it's giving it the information. It's essentially like telling it how to do it, right?
Had a
It's going to go
question.
run that code.
Sir.
It's going to bring it back, and it'll inject that into the prompt, and then it'll keep going until it says its task is complete, and it'll spit back a message. What's the question?
We have, how does the web search tool output get summarized so quickly with so much information that's available?
Um, Great question. I don't really.
Yeah.
Lots of GPUs. That's the only way I know how to answer that question. I don't actually know.
Fair.
Uh, I'll try to answer that question. Maybe the next slide will kind of give an example, and that might help a little bit. How does it get summarized so quickly? I think that's just a function of the model's ability to spit out tokens at a certain rate, right? And like it's just reading that and then consuming that and spitting it out.
Thanks.
So I'll try to give an example here. Maybe that'll help clarify some of that, although I don't know that I could speak to the actual speed of it. So let's talk through an example of like a tool call. So let's say you have a model that you're prompting, and you want to know what the current stock price of Apple is, and your agent has the system prompt to tell it, hey, you're a helpful assistant, and you have this web search capability. All right, so the user prompts it. This is what the agent sees. Well, the agent sends it to the LLM, and the LLM says, hey, I need to make a tool call. So you get this response back that's saying, hey, I want to make a tool call, and I want to call the get stock price function, and I want to pass in the ticker AAPL because that's the ticker for Apple. And I'm going to give it this call ID so I can associate the answer back to the original prompt. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have your agent code go out, and it's going to run this get stock price function that you've got. It's going to go get the stock price, and then it's going to spit back this content. Hey, the stock price is $224. It is not $224 right now, but it's in US dollars and today's date or last night's date. And the agent will take that back and it'll spit back some response, and it'll say, hey, the price of Apple stock is $224.50. So it takes that and it puts it back into a more natural language format. You have a question?
Yeah. Clarifying question for me. So I've always thought about MCPs as kind of being like a call. It's almost like an API for your agents with some sort of tool. Is that a correct sort of thought about it, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same question? Okay. So MCP is essentially, I guess your question is, if I'm going to try to parrot it back so that way the folks online can hear. MCP is sort of a API for LLMs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of it. I've never built one or worked with it very closely, so that part of it is a little bit of a black box to me. And for the longest, as I was putting this together, I kept like asking Gemini, like, how does the agent actually know how to call the tool? Like, how does it, like, what's the mechanism there? And so there's post training that happens where it gets the idea of being able to call a tool. And it reminded me, and this is gonna sound really silly, it reminded me of when I was in high school. I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I'm learning how to program. I have a book that I'm going through, right? And I'm learning how to program. I'm typing in like the code, trying to run it on my own machine. And my mom's standing there and she's like, how do you know what to type when you're programming? Like, how do you know what to do? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm just reading about it in a book and I'm doing what the book says. And it's kind of like the same thing. The LLM just kind of reads, oh, here's how you call this tool. Here's what the tool does. And then it figures out how to use the tool. So it's a little human in that sense, which is really weird to say out loud. Any other questions? Did I answer your question? Hope I did. Yeah. All right. All right, cool. So that's kind of the foundational stuff out of the way. So let's talk about Microsoft Foundry. So Microsoft Foundry is a managed service from Microsoft to run agents. So instead of you trying to provision your own GPUs and hardware to run an LLM and to put all the scaffolding up for that, you can just spin up a Microsoft Foundry service. You can select what model you want to use. You can deploy that model. You can then build an agent on top of it, and you have an API that you can call to interact with your agent. And it gives you a lot of nice features about that. You can limit how many tokens, say, your model or agent can produce. to control costs. You can evaluate your models. You have observability into who's calling your model and kind of what those prompts look like, what tools get called. And then you can also put security around it as well. And then another bullet point here, Foundry has a lot of built-in tools, especially within the Microsoft ecosystem. So I don't have a demo of it, but you could say have an agent that's connected to, say, if you're using, say, Microsoft Fabric, you could connect your agent to Fabric. And so you could have an agent that maybe is hosted in an application. You could ask it a question. It could say, hey, I can know to get the answer to that if I go query Fabric. And so it can ask Fabric to go query some data and then bring that data back to you, just as a simple example. So a lot of baked-in tools. I mentioned RAG earlier. So let's say you have a SharePoint site with some documentation. There's a SharePoint integration, so you could then connect it to SharePoint, and you got all your internal documentation there. Instead of having to sift through and search through that documentation, you can just ask your agent to go look into the documentation and tell you about it. So structurally with Foundry, you spin up a Foundry resource inside of Azure. And this sort of is like the big giant container that you put stuff in. And that's going to control what models you've deployed and a lot of the settings and what connections you have to other services. But then within that, you're going to create a project. And so you can have some segmentation about maybe I have 4 or 5 different projects and I want to keep the agents, sort of separated because maybe they're purpose built for certain things, right? So the project's going to be sort of another container within that you spin up. That's where you're going to build your agents. You're going to evaluate agents if you have them in there, all the observations and things like that you can see. So you might ask, why Microsoft Foundry? 2 reasons. The first one is it's kind of like having friends when you're a kid. It's just whoever's around. Those are your friends. And then someone laughed at that. All right, cool. Working on that one for too long. And then the last one is I have Azure credits through Aaron, who spoke a minute ago about a job that he's got. Aaron and I have worked together for a number of years, and I have Azure credits through him from working with him, and have a Visual Studio subscription with $150 a month that I can do what I want with. So I, threw it at this. So today's sponsor is Sound BI. So you can, Aaron, you want to say anything about Sound BI as this, since you're the sponsor of today's talk? Is this the speaker heckling the audience? Is that happening? All right, cool. Nothing. All right, so deploying models. It'd been funner if I didn't tell them I was going to do that. Deploying models. So I'll jump out of the slides here in a second. And we'll actually get into some stuff. I'll show you. There's plenty of models to pick from. It's really overwhelming, the amount of models that are out there to pick from. But with Foundry, you can select a model. You can then pick which model you want to deploy, and then start using it. A couple things to think about when you're picking a model. First off is the task that you're actually trying to do. You need to think about what you're actually trying to accomplish. Do I really need the high-powered reasoning model, or will one of the smaller models suffice? If I'm giving it all the information up front, do I really need it to reason about it? If I'm just trying to summarize that information, the smaller models are actually pretty good at doing this. The demo then would show at the end, the only model I'm using is the GPT-5.4 Nano. So for it being the small guy, it actually did a lot. So I was pretty impressed. And I would actually recommend when you're starting to pick this out, I would say just start small and see what it can do, and then step up as you think that you might need more horsepower. Another piece that you want to consider obviously is pricing, right? So it's usually a function of your input and output tokens. So if you can get some workload together and you can see what's my usage going to look like, how about how many tokens am I going to be putting in, how many tokens I'm going to be spitting out, you can start to calculate what that cost looks like and kind of get a sense of, am I going to spend a lot of money with this or not, or where that's going to be. And then you need to think about throughput, how much, what's the token per second that the agent can actually spit out, how quick is that? And then one thing that you really need to think about is quota. So Microsoft just off the bat is going to have some set quota of like, you can only have this much throughput before you're rate limited. And I think for me, when I first spun up this Foundry instance, everything was set to 0 and I had to go ask them to spin something up for me. So it might depend on what data center you're spinning up, what location you're spinning up Foundry in. But I had to go ask permission. I think Michael and I worked together, and he kind of made the joke of Oliver Twist coming up and asking for, more. And it's like, more tokens, please. So that was fun.
Sam may have enough
Oh, got another question. Okay. I don't see the chat, so.
Oh, sorry, I missed that one. So what is your preferred ADK agent development kit for building agents? I only use Google ADK, but is there anything better you would suggest?
I couldn't compare and contrast. For this example or this presentation, I'm using the Microsoft Agent Framework. So I would maybe defer to that. Just, kind of getting back to that point about, I'm in the Microsoft ecosystem already and I use it a lot for a lot of different things. So I'm going to kind of default to Azure and what Azure services are out there. So therefore, I'm going to default to what Azure toolkits are out there because it's like, the friends that I had when I was a kid, it's just whoever was around. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Agent development kit. Yeah, great question. We'll get to some of that here in a second. So
We actually got one more while I got your attention.
yeah, let's do it.
Do you have anything to say about eval loops and how it can improve quality over time? I could see edge cases in a process leading to changes in the process that make it continuously better and implementing those changes as a permanently ongoing role.
I don't have anything to say about it. So there, easy peasy. No, I don't. I really don't. And that's only because I didn't dig into it enough. I think that's kind of the next area to research in. There's evaluators baked into Foundry, like out of the box that you can just use. And some of those are looking for things like task adherence, the kind of content. Is it, looks like it's answering the question, that kind of thing. There's probably some other strategies that you could develop as well. One that I would be interested in looking at is maybe you could call it LLM as a judge, where you're saying, hey, here's the set of prompts that I'm interested in measuring against, and then what what I might expect an output to be, or maybe I take the prompt, I send it to my agent, I then get the output from the agent, and I take that to the LLM judge and say, hey, was this pretty close to what I was asking for? And you can kind of get it to kind of give you a yes, no on it. So I don't have any good examples of that. There's some baked in stuff with Foundry, but I don't have anything for this presentation. So I guess I did have a little bit to say on that. So quickly building agents in Foundry. There's this was really confusing when I first started reading the documentation because it's not super clear. And I don't know if that's a Microsoft Foundry thing or if that's just this is all brand new stuff and you don't know what you're reading until you finally get in there and start playing with it. But there's this idea of prompted versus hosted agents. And what I'm using is a prompt agent. So it's where I go into Fabric, I build the agent inside of I said Fabric. I go into Foundry and I build the agent inside of Foundry. So that's called a prompt agent. You can do it in code using either the Microsoft Agent Framework or the Azure AI projects library, where you can via code build out your agent and then go host that in a container inside of Foundry. And that would expose an endpoint where you could then talk to your agent, from your client code. But this demo, I'm just doing prompted agents. So for the agent, you're going to define your instruction prompt and how you want it to, work with the user prompt and what kind of responses you want it to be able to get back, how you want maybe output to be formatted. You're going to define what tools you want that agent to have access to. And then what's really neat is as you build that out and you save that, you're publishing new versions of it. And so we'll see in the code here in a few minutes, when you reference that agent, you're going to reference it by name and by version. So it creates a little bit of a easy transition as you're developing the agent or as you're trying to improve it. Your application doesn't have to, keep up with it. You can increment your application based on the version. And then lastly, observability. So with Foundry, you have the ability to observe what prompts are coming into your agent, and then how that agent is constructing the output and the output itself. So it's pretty cool to see. So enough of me talking. Let's actually jump out of these slides and let's go over to Foundry and take a look. Nope, because it's doing the same thing under the hood. It's just calling the model that's residing in Foundry. It's just, do you want to manage that in code where you might check that into version control and manage it that way versus managing it via the UI? So it just depends on what you're comfortable with. Great question. All right. Let's see if it's gonna, hey, let me in without asking me for a magic number. All right. All right, let me back up a little bit. And so when you first spin up Foundry and jump in, you'll be presented to a page that looks kind of like this. I will zoom in a little bit. Does that look okay? You guys see that all right? All right. Got everything up here. I need to like move it out of the way. All right, so I'm going to jump over. Before I jump over to Discover and start showing you all the models that are out there, there's this new Foundry button here. I think when you spin up one now, that'll be clicked automatically. You don't have to worry about it. If you've had Foundry for a while and you click that button, everything's going to break. So we were doing a hackathon at HealthTrust, and I built a Streamlit app that reviewed, we call them cross references. They're two items. Basically, it's like, are these the same thing or not, or similar or not? And today, our analysts have to review all that stuff manually, right? And it's all in Excel when they do it too. So it's like, can I build an app to help them kind of expedite that process? And so, I can say, hey, here's item one, here's item two. But then also, I've asked a model to tell me about the differences of these two items, or are they similar or not? And it's already prompted it and presented that. So I built that app in a day, and I was really excited about it. And I showed it to my boss, and he's like, "Oh, hey, yeah, they got this new Foundry thing. You can click that button right there." I was like, "Oh yeah, I want the new stuff." And so I clicked it, and it broke, and I just couldn't believe it. And then I prompted Copilot like, "Hey, I need to update this library to use the new thing," and then it couldn't figure it out because it was a new library and it didn't know how to do it. So that was fun. I actually had to code for once, whatever. Anyways, so when I come into Discover, you'll see there's a bunch of models out there already. Let's see if they spin up. And that's maybe also kind of an overwhelming aspect of this, is there's just so much stuff out there already. And this stuff hadn't even been around for a few years. And so there's plenty to pick from. I went with GPT-5.4 Nano for my project, and that's two factors. One is the cost. I have only so many Azure credits, and I think when I spun it up, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to use the Azure credits or not, so I went with the cheap one. But you have plenty of others to pick from as well. So when you deploy it, I'm going to see if I can drill into this guy a little bit. You'll get a model card here, and it'll tell you a little bit about the model and what it's good at and what it can do. Things to think about. There's usually some link out to pricing from wherever that comes from. And so you get some things like, the context window. So here you could have, what is that, 1 million tokens within your context window. And so that's something to think about too, right? If like you start having a bunch of information that you're trying to pass to this LLM, somebody asked about like, hey, it's got all this web results, and then it's trying to summarize that really quickly. Like eventually you can only have so much stuff in that context window before it like just starts forgetting things, essentially, or you have to truncate that. So managing, depending on what you're doing, you may have to try to manage that. It's also like tokens too, it's like Chuck E. Cheese tokens. You don't really know how much that thing's worth. And you kind of have to like, I got Megan with that one, so I'll take it. Tokens are basically word or word fragments. And so then it's like, well, how many words am I going to send to this agent? And it's like, well, I don't know how many words are in like the description of an item that I haven't seen yet. So like, you don't really know, and that's why you got to play with it, and you got to get a data set, and you got to analyze it and understand, okay, well, here's roughly how many I think I'll have, so it's pretty hard to kind of think about. Anyways. So let me jump over to go back. Well, I'll just jump over to build. All right, so coming over to build, this is where you can actually create an agent. And in here, I've created a couple different ones. So the demo I'll show is, it's a stock analyzer app, right? And so the idea is that I can have a portfolio of stocks. The agent will, or the app itself goes out to Yahoo Finance, collects data about the stock, and produces some technical indicators. So it's looking at simple moving averages, and there's a couple other metrics it's putting together to create a buy, sell, hold, quote unquote, signal. So I first built an agent that just summarizes those indicators, and it just summarizes those into plain text. And then I also had a researcher agent that I put together. And so we'll click into the stock researcher, and it's going to go out and it's going to build a bull and a bear case for the stock, right? So the bull case is saying, hey, here are reasons why you might want to invest in this stock. The bear case is going to say, hey, here are things that are going against it right now. Here are things to watch out for if you make that investment. So the instruction prompt, I just give it a simple like, hey, you're a stock market research agent, whatever that means. and you're gonna do this. You're gonna build a bull case and a bear case, and you're gonna format your output like this. And then down here, I've given it the web search tool. All right, so it has the ability to go out and do web search and bring that information in as it makes a decision. So it's not relying on just the model or the data, excuse me, the data that it's trained on. It can go out and fetch new information and then summarize that information for you. So within Foundry, you can also, say, hey, I'm interested in shoot, let's go for SpaceX. Do not invest in SpaceX.
Yeah. How much do you recommend the outcomes of this agent right now? Should we be taking notes or?
Well, we'll see what it says about SpaceX. I have opinions on SpaceX.
Also had a question if you could share your prompts for those two agents. Not sure.
Yeah, well, it's yes. I can share the prompts for this agent because it's all in a GitHub repo, and that's linked at the end of the slides, and you guys will be able to see that. So yes, so the app itself does the prompting. There's one section of the app I haven't talked about yet that user inputs the prompt, so that's going to be more up to you. But it'll actually show the prompts of all history there, so you have access to that too. But anyways, you could read through this. I'm not going to read it because I want to keep going. Let's see. Profitability concerns. There you go. Volatility high, capital investment, valuation risk. Doesn't talk about, I think the thing right now is there's a bunch of shares that are locked up they can't sell and they're about to be able to sell. So how many of those people are going to start selling the stock? So what's interesting is, or what's fun is the traces you can go and look and see. Here's the trace that actually happened when we invoked that agent. So I think here, there's our instruction prompt, and then there's our prompt. I'm interested in SpaceX, ticker SPCX. I spelled ticker wrong, but it was okay with that. We can see here, so we talked about that tool call earlier. Let's see, just gonna, some kind of finance tool. I don't know what that is because I told it to do web search. But it went out and searched the ticker. Looks like it did a couple different web searches. I don't know. I've seen it, not on this one, but on others. I think I've seen it actually spit out like what it searched for, like the actual like query. But it might just be because it's so long, it just, for like you said, the UI, just to make it short. But I haven't seen any documentation or anything saying why. But anyways, you can use that to kind of evaluate, hey, here's what people are using the prompt for. Or if say you have an application and people are using it, you can use this. And there's IDs to be able to trace back to the specific output or whatever if someone's having an issue, or maybe someone's, instead of asking about stocks, is trying to get its favorite burrito recipe, and you want to, investigate that. So things like that. And you can collect the data on what people are prompting in the outputs. And we kind of mentioned evaluations earlier. Maybe you bring some of those prompts into an evaluation and try to improve it over time. So as you maybe look to upgrade or go to the next version, you can evaluate, hey, am I making improvements on some of these things? And it can be less of a subjective, opinionated thing and more of an objective, like, hey, this is what our data shows. Yes.
So I know this one's the stock researcher agent created, right? I saw on the previous page too, there's also, you might be getting this, but trends researcher, right?
Yep.
So, like, one thing I struggle with working with like these agents, trying to figure out like how I want to like split things up is, when do I say, okay, I should build two separate agents with their own context windows, their own instructions, or would it make more sense just to make a market researcher and it does both the things at the same time? Like, how do you, I guess, is it more of experience whenever you learn when to like separate certain things, or like, I don't know, like, do you have a rule of thumb that you should be going by?
That's a great question. So for the folks on Zoom, the question, I'm going to try to summarize what you asked. You can tell me if I do a good job of summarizing it. Basically, when do you break down something from just asking one agent to do it, maybe in a single prompt, and when do you break that down into multiple prompts that are maybe handled through a chain of agents that prefer? Yeah, you specialize them. Yeah, great question. That's actually these two here are doing that. So the trends researcher goes and researches an idea that you have, and it'll go get a bunch of data, and then it gives it to the market analyst. And the market analyst is instructed to actually give you stock picks based on that data. Why did I break it down? Because I was trying to force an example where I did exactly what you just described. So there's not that's not a good reason to do it, but it's more that I was wanting to kind of showcase that capability there. Now, maybe more to your question of like, when do you decide to actually break these things down? That's a great question. I don't know that I have like a solid rule of thumb. Oh yeah, you got to do it at this point. I would say first off, when it makes sense, if you can break down the tasks more easily, I think you're gonna have a better time getting the model to do what you want it to do. I like to use the analogy of like if you've ever managed like people or had kids, and like you try to tell your son or daughter to like clean up the room or do something, right? Sometimes you might have to break that down into like simpler steps for them, or even in the office place, right? Like I can go to somebody and say like, hey, we need to build XYZ thing. But if I'm being very abstract about what that thing is, or I don't have good, clear requirements around it, right? They're probably not going to really do a great job because I might not have communicated that. I'm not delegating that well to that person. So delegation is kind of the secret sauce skill set that's there that a lot of people just either they don't have because it's not like a skill that people just have. Like you kind of have to learn that skill. It's like a whole different like ball game or a way of thinking sometimes. So that's kind of my take on it. Is if can you break down the work enough up front so that multiple agents can do it. Another thing I'll say, Megan talked about this last month. I remembered stuff from your presentation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. There was an example that she had of she had sub agents that validated the output of an agent. So her agents were going and summarizing information about patients' medical records, right? And then the sub agent was saying, hey, can I tie all the stuff that this agent said back to the original data? Summarizing some of that. But that's essentially what's happening there. So you could break it down that way too if you want to try to do some level of validation within your quote unquote workflow. Yeah. Back to that idea I threw out earlier of like the LLM as a judge, you could use another agent to kind of judge the output. Is this, a good thing or not? So yeah. Do you have another question? Or she had enough questions last month. You're here,
Kind of thinking about agents correctly, but I always tend to think of it as roles. It's like, okay, like if this agent is like my coder, then there needs to be another agent that's QA that checks the first agent. And there might be like
probably not a bad idea. Again, you're breaking that work down, right? You wouldn't want to do it all in one because that just might be too much that it just can't do it.
Like different personas too. It's like the person who what that person. Yeah. Maybe I think about it too much like people. I'm like, it's a different skill set.
You ever use Copilot to build something and then you commit it and you send it up for a PR and then you ask Copilot to review the PR and it comes back with a bunch of stuff and you're like, hey, who wrote this code? Yeah, same idea. Yeah. Okay. Who's in charge here? Yeah, great stuff. All right. Glenn, how are we doing on time, Glenn? Am I like way off? I feel like I am.
I don't know how many hours have left.
All right, cool. They fly by, let me tell you. All right. All right, so that's enough of the UI. Let's get to some code. I'll speed through some of this so we can have a little bit of time at the end to network some more. Two libraries I want to show: Azure AI Projects, Microsoft Agent Framework. Very lightly touching on both of these. There's links in the slides to like samples, and that was super helpful for me to like get my head around like how do I actually use this thing, is actually looking at some code and reading through it. Quick note, I'll mention some other APIs to look at. The Azure AI projects we'll see here in a second. Actually, you get an open API client when you're working with it. So looking up its documentation, getting familiar with how the model it's using for interacting with an agent, it was super helpful for me to understand kind of what's happening there and how to think about it. And then I think somebody mentioned LangChain earlier. LangGraph is another one that you could use to kind of string together some of these workflows for agents, and that's compatible with Foundry as well. So there's ways to have an agent hosted in Foundry and then have your use LangGraph, or in my case, I'm using the agent framework to connect to those and work with them that way. So the Azure AI Project is the SDK for Microsoft Foundry. Allows you to quickly connect and work with the agents and work with the resources programmatically. So if you don't want to go through the UI and click all the buttons, you can do it via the library there. So there's some links to the documentation and the example code as well. So the AI project library is pretty straightforward to use. You can just create an AI project client. You connect to it. Here I am connecting to it with my Azure credentials. And I've set up my user in Azure to have access to Foundry and can work with those agents. You can also do it via an API key. So there's a couple different ways that can work as well. And then once you have that project client, you can get an open API client and do the responses API with your agent. And so the way you would reference that agent is in this extra body here. You would pass along, this would be your agent name. So we saw what was one stock researcher. That would be the agent name, and then version 2, I think, was where it was at. So version 2 would be here for the version number. But then you pass along the message, and then you get the output text from there. And so that's a pretty easy way to do it. There's actually there's other options here for like being able to, if you want to be fancy and stream in the output of the LLM. So you know how like when you go to ChatGPT or Gemini or pick whichever one you want, you enter in a prompt and then you start to see text kind of flowing and appearing on the screen. Like you can stream it in that way if you really wanted to. This all runs in a background app, so who cares if it's streaming it? Say again. Oh, let me jump out real quick and I'll show where that's at. So the question was about the agent version number, how you know what version number you're on. So right here we see version 2. If I were to come in here, and it shouldn't hurt the app, but if I came in here and say, trying to think how I would want to change this. Maybe I actually changed what model I'm using, or something like that. You would see this 2 tick up to a 3. And then you can publish that and it would be available as version 3. Now my code would still be using version 2, so it'd still be using this version of the model, right? And it wouldn't be until I incremented the version for the app code would it start using like the new version, right? Is that initial code? I'm sorry, say again. Initial code and first, like kind of development activity to use initial code. If you do some modification, yeah, and yes. So the question was about like how does it increment the version, and like everything, anytime you hit that save button, it's going to increment the version. Yeah. Cool. Where were we? Okay, and then I'll show this. Let's get back to the slideshow. There we go. Managing a conversation. So we talked about that context window and it getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? One way to do this is you build up within your app itself, you actually build up a list of all the interactions between user agent, and that back and forth conversation. And every time you go to do a response, this is actually this chat history right here is it's a list object in Python, right? So I'm sending a list of this interaction back. And so that's kind of giving that, because remember the agent is stateless. Every time you call it doesn't know who you are. So you got to tell it, hey, we've been having this conversation. Here's all the things that we've been saying together. And you got to kind of remind it every time you make that API call. All right. So if you're doing something like this, you might want to monitor, well, how big is my, the content that I'm sending over, how big is that getting? And do I need to like scrunch it down? Do I need to maybe summarize some of the information maybe earlier in the conversation? Do I need to compact that data? Which is already in the history. Will it charge the tokens again? Yes. Every time you make every time you ask it, it's gonna. Would take from cache? Well, I don't know enough about how the caching works to know when it would or wouldn't. I think it would for maybe some things like your instruction prompt, because it's going to see that every time. And if you're asking the exact same question, maybe, but the output is non-deterministic, so I don't know how the output would be in that sense. Maybe the input tokens would count as cash, but I don't know if they would count that or not. So I don't know enough about kind of that mechanism to speak to it. That's a good question. Different. Yeah. I had a lot of questions too. It was insane, like going through this, like just how confusing it is.
Like at this level. So when you, maybe you, when you were doing this as just a demo, you weren't thinking about this, but like chat history, when you're thinking about compacting it, is there like something within the API, like the native OpenAI compact that you can get to, or are you maybe using a different agent to then summarize, compact it, and then send it next? I'm sorry, maybe that's
I don't have an answer because I don't know. You could, I guess, theoretically have an agent summarize some string of conversation and maybe keep the high points because you wouldn't want to try to hand code that, right? So that would make sense to me. So yeah, so the question was about like if I'm trying to summarize that chat history context, what would be a good way to do that? And so maybe just ask the LLM, hey, summarize what we've got so far. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we very quickly talked about the Azure AI projects library, but maybe I need something a little more sophisticated. Maybe I'd rather manage agents and code. Maybe I want to have humans and agents work together in a workflow. Maybe I have custom tools I want to implement, and maybe I want to have some requirement like, hey, you got to check the box button before I actually go do the tool call. So Microsoft Agent Framework is a tool that allows you to do those things. So there's a link to some Python examples there. That was a great resource for me. So using the Agent Framework, it felt really intimidating to need a whole framework to go call this thing, but it actually ended up being relatively straightforward once you kind of got into it. Being able to instantiate a Foundry agent and then reference. So in this case, I'm referencing that agent trends researcher. So it's at version 7, and then here's that market analyst one at version 4. I can reference those directly with the agent framework using the Foundry package. And then I don't do it here in this code example, but this market analyst and this trends researcher Python object has a run method. I could just, if I wanted to just prompt it straight up, I could just hit that run method and pass along my prompt, and I'd get the output back. Right, and I could work with it. However, in this scenario, I want to use a workflow to sort of string those things along and make life simpler. So what I'm doing here is what's called a sequential builder, and there are different orchestration sort of types that are available within the agent framework. So here I'm just saying, hey, I just want the trends researcher to first take the prompt, do its thing, and then the output of that needs to get passed along to the market analyst for it to do its thing, and then I want the output of the market analyst. And so that's what the rest of this code here is doing. So I take the prompt, I run it, I get the output, and then I'm just spitting out the text there for the message. So there's also kind of the first one that you'll see in the documentation as you go through is a workflow builder, and that's a very open-ended. You could build any kind of DAG you wanted, and that would it's very customizable, right? But here I just wanted the one after the other, and it did it pretty well. So. Pretty straightforward. Any questions on that?
Because we are combining from participants, so you can access all the previous stuff on it.
That's right. Yeah. So the question was on permissions. So I don't have an example of that. So but I can speak to it a little bit where maybe you have a tool call that you're wanting to build for your agent. Some of the documentation online was, it had a couple of things like, maybe you're building an agent for HR and you want to be able to have people, instead of go into the system and log in to say request PTO, you could have the agent do that for you automatically, right? And so that could be an example where you don't want it maybe to just call that API to request PTO automatically. You would want it to first say, hey, here's what I'm about to do. Are you okay with that? So you can integrate that into your tools to say, hey, the agent wants to call this tool. Are you okay with it calling the tool? So I don't know if that was super helpful because there's a lot of hand waving there, but yeah, in this case, yeah. So this first one, this first agent it sends a message to the market analyst and it picks it up and runs with it. there's not like the permissioning in the sense would just be who can use this workflow, right? And because I have access to Foundry and I didn't call it out, but right here I'm creating this default Azure credential and I'm passing that credential along, right? So I have access to do this thing. So the app that's running, maybe that's running up in the cloud, it has access to Foundry. It can run these workflows that I've custom built.
End of the day, both are your agent project.
That's right. Now, you actually bring up a good point. I don't talk about it in the slides anywhere. Foundry does create this thing called an agent identity. And you could think of it like if you're familiar with Azure and like having like a managed identity for your service that you run. It's kind of the same idea just for your agent. So of course they got to put the branding on it. But the idea would be like I can give that agent identity access to say like a database or to some other thing. And as it's running and executing things, it can go talk to those services. So like some of I didn't show it, but let me jump back over to Foundry here with this agent and let me go to the tools here. If I wanted to add a tool to the stock researcher, and maybe I've got, I'm going to zoom out if that's all right. Yeah, maybe I want to use Fabric, and so I want to connect it to Fabric, or I want to connect it to SharePoint's in here. So there's SharePoint. So maybe I give that agent identity access to my SharePoint repository.
I think there's a question online as well. We probably cut out. It's 10 minutes. I'm not sure.
That's enough. That's plenty of time. Go. What's the question?
I was just asking if you could kind of clarify what you mean by DAG in this context.
DAG, directed acyclic graph. So I have. So I was talking about the workflow builder. You could have essentially, this first agent, it produces some output, and then maybe it's going to take that output and pass it along to step number 2, and step number 2 is going to do something, and that's going to go to 2 other steps, and you're going to kind of build this tree out of different steps to take. So hopefully that answers the question. All right, back.
Spencer, how many times have you in the toolkit put context with healthcare specific context so that all the conversations were put against that taxonomy and context?
Exactly 0. 0. There's some things you could. I'm thinking about like what your use case might be for something like that, because the agent's going to know a lot about a lot of stuff, right? Kind of up front. And like as we've been exploring it and playing with it for like products, right, for that a hospital might be purchasing, it's surprising how much it already knows, and that we don't have to like bring to it to say like, hey, here's the Medline catalog, for example, and all the items that they sell. So help me understand this item a little bit more. So I think it just depends on your use case. Your question kind of makes me want to lean towards talking about fine tuning a little bit, but I would almost. I have a hard time seeing when the appropriate time to fine tune is. Like you'd really want to have like, hey, here's my set of prompts or the things I'm trying to do, and I have some data to back up and measure kind of how a base model performs at that. And then I want to go through the effort of taking that fine tuning against it. And now, did I get an incremental improvement because of my fine tuning exercise? And that might be where, hey, we're going to expose the model to a bunch of, healthcare is pretty broad. So like maybe it's, medical research documents or something like that. I'm going to really allow it to just read about a bunch of this stuff, and it's going to get really good at it. You'd want to try to measure that performance. If you're doing that though, you could also so one of the tools here was, like you could upload your own files into this. You can also use Azure AI Search. So maybe like in that example of having documents like research reports, like you could just either give it to the agent directly or have it in Azure AI Search and have those documents there available. And then you're connecting to it like it's a RAG application where it can go and first query those document repositories, bring that context in, and then they summarize it for you. So I don't know if that really answers your question or not, but that's my take. Yeah.
So when it comes to use cases for purchase HealthTrust, give us some examples of the type use cases. What are the questions?
I'm sorry. So realized use cases of what was the first part of the question? Yeah, we don't have any in production, so let me just go ahead and this is all research right now. So we're looking at potentially using one to do description enhancements. So one of the big challenges we have is we have a bunch of members sending us data about items. We know about a lot of items. We don't know about every item. We certainly don't know about brand new items to the market. And sometimes we just have the description that the member gives us to go off of, and it's a truncated description or it's very limited in what it tells us. We have like a catalog number and maybe the vendor who makes the product, right? That can help us get more information. So can we use an LLM to, I think two things here. One, can I get more information about the item first up? And then second, can I take that, maybe the item description itself, excuse me, or maybe a whole bunch of information about the item. Can I then break that down into attributes about the item? So like gloves a pretty simple example, right? Like what size is a glove? What material is it made out of? Is it latex free or not? That's a big one. Is there a brand associated with it? Those kinds of things. So can I break it down like maybe think of it like a JSON object of those different properties, right? And then I can take that and then maybe that I can use that to maybe construct my own description out of those properties, because maybe I want the noun of the object to be first and then certain sub details about it to come after. So does that answer your question? Yeah. All right, cool. All right, let's see if I can figure out how to move Zoom out of the, there we go. Good deal. Oh no. Okay. All right, we'll put that down there. All right, so so I've mentioned the demo app. This is the demo app. And it's actually available. You can go to it. I'll jump back over here. If you want to hit that QR code, I didn't test it, but it should work. And you can go to the website yourself. You can go to the website yourself and try it out. So this is it. This was something before I even thought about doing this talk. I had this idea of like, hey, I want to like put something together that I can like use to kind of measure stocks on and play with. And I have a Gemini subscription, so I was like, well, I've got the ability to build these things, so let's just try it out. And so on a Saturday, I threw it together and prompted Gemini to build it, and it built it in like 20 minutes. And then I just sat there and thought, man, it really took all the fun out of this, and because now I'm done with this thing. And so I had it, and then said, hey, let's think about agents. Can I do something more interesting with it? So I'll use NVIDIA as an example. So I mentioned it goes out to Yahoo Finance. That's how it's pulling all of this ticker data or this pricing data. The app itself calculates the moving averages and whatnot. And then that information is all summarized up here in the technical consensus. But then I have the bull and bear case available from the output of the LLM. It's pretty small. I don't know if you guys can read it or not. There we go. So you can kind of read through some of that if you like. What else? I'll click off of that. The way this works, there's a background job that runs. So it doesn't just go like when I click that, right? It's not going and prompting the agent. It's already prompted the agent. It's just storing that in a SQLite database in the app itself. So if I wanted to add a new stock here, I'm not going to do SpaceX because for whatever reason that one doesn't work. That might be it. Let's see. Let's add Coinbase because why not? So you'll see here Coinbase, it's pending, and it's going out right now to Foundry. It's prompting the agent, hey, what's going on with Coinbase? It pulled it all out. It says, hey, don't buy Coinbase. So I don't know why we'd have to read the bear case. I'm pretty bearish on crypto in general, so I tend to agree with that. If I jump back over here, our stock researcher, let's go to the traces, and I should see if it loads, I should see that looks about right on time. And please provide a bull and bear case for the stock. Oh, somebody add RCAT. Did somebody add that one? Let's see, that one was RCAT. Oh, did you do it?
Yeah.
Hey, there you go. There's Coinbase. Nice.
I didn't know that's actually.
Why I wouldn't share it if I didn't want you to try it out. But no, it's all good. Oh, cool. Someone added. What's MU? Is that Micron? I don't know why the name didn't come through. That's interesting. So there's some information about that one. So we got a couple here to look at. Well, maybe not RCAT or Micron's a sell. Gosh, is only Microsoft to buy? Okay. ADMA. What is ADMA? Yeah, it's down, so maybe it'll go back up. I don't know. But okay. It biotech's hard. I'll stick with Ferrari. It's got a strong buy. There you go. How many? The question is how many? Yeah, there you go. So about 429 out. What was that? 400, 400. It's definitely more on the input side. I don't know. This one's a lot more than like this one, right? And this one's even smaller. So I don't know. Oh, it might be because of the web search that it's pulling back. Like how much information is pulling back. Those are counting as input tokens there. So that's a good call out. But yeah, roughly less than 1,000 on the output tokens. But you know, I'd say around 10,000 on the input. Yeah. So. Yes. Oh, yeah. She put you on the spot. I don't know. Yes. It decided to do it in the original prompt. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we'll pull it from Yahoo and blah 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 blah. Yeah, it was pretty slick. I was impressed with it.
Do you have any worries about it going out and trying to grab data from someplace that's not yeah, not secure,
No.
something that's
No.
not a good source?
It's gonna stick to the objective that you give it. And I mean, I'm only telling it to go search the web, right? So it's not. I don't give it, like, for this particular agent, I'm not giving it the ability to go execute code or anything like that, right? Is this a more general?
Go out, check Sydney's real great blog about what she thinks about stuff, and then bring it back and be like, the full case on this is that Sydney really likes it.
I'm not super worried about it, only because I think the links that I've seen so far are more like, you know, like CNBC and more general like financial news. Like I think there's enough stuff out there that like the small guys actually getting squeezed out probably in terms of like their opinion. But that's a good point. It's like, well, you know, there's companies that'll put out like a short report on a company, right, and try to tank the stock because they took a short position in it, and then a bunch of people follow them, and Citadel does that, right? Or they've been accused of doing it. I don't know, you know, whatever. But
there are a lot of influencers in the crypto world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I at the same time, like it's doing a web search, and if I was doing this myself manually, I would just be doing the same web search, and maybe I come across Sydney's tech blog or whatever, and read about, you know, oh yeah, you're real big on Tesla right now, and so maybe I should invest. And you know, I read your case, and maybe I think, oh, maybe I shouldn't. I should. The inverse Jim Cramer, yeah, we could do that. Nice. The last one I'll show here, I don't know if anybody jumped over to it. Maybe some, I don't think, this one's not me, I don't think so. Maybe someone did this, or no, I did this before maybe. Anyways, to showcase the idea of the workflow, I have a research report here, so you could prompt this with anything. So if you're on the page, you can jump over to research reports. If you're on mobile, it like shows up in the top as just this like piece of paper. You can click that. You can type in whatever you want in here, and it'll go research that topic, and then it'll give you a report out on that particular subject. So yeah, what's your question? Yeah. All right, I'm gonna kick one off, and then while it's running, we can chat. All right, so let's say in-person meetups are on the rise. What companies did I consider in this industry? I actually don't know if meetups are on the rise, but you know, we'll say they are because we're all here online. Oh dang, that came back super quick. Gave me some vectors. It actually did it not give me any? Yeah, this one didn't give me anything. That one wasn't very good. I liked actually like this one the best. Well, I like this one the best, and I'm going to say something bad or not wrong with it. What I wanted was something more closer to this. I've been getting to F1 recently. I feel like there's a lot of room for F1 to grow in the US. What are some ways to invest? Well, it turns out there is Formula One Group, or Liberty Formula One Group, and so they've got some ownership in that, and you can benefit from the rise in advertising happening there. It suggested Live Nation Entertainment because of venues and people going to these different kinds of events. Which I don't know if they're really a part of that or not. But then SiriusXM was another one. That one was kind of a weak one. Ferrari would have been the stock to add in here, and it didn't add it. So, anyways, but that's the idea. So it's just a simple idea to take a prompt and kind of run it through a workflow and get some kind of output. And we talked about evaluators earlier. So this one here that we just did that didn't give me any. This one didn't give me any stocks. Maybe we could say, hey, this one's actually not a good, prompt. And if we, build up a data set of maybe some of these now that we've got a couple in here, which ones are good kind of reports, which ones are bad reports, and we can start evaluating them. And as we update our models to try to, or agents to be a little bit more productive with it, we can kind of measure against that to say, hey, yeah, this one was recommending a stock. That was a good thing. So cool.
Let's question online about using this app. Have you come up with any stocks that are in favor of?
No, this is just a demo. No, it's just a demo. Actually, I got a point right here in my final thoughts, so we can wrap it up. I actually I like this just to be able to go explore things and do research. But if you're really into investing, it's generally just better just to buy the index and kind of stick with that. So that's kind of the real advice there. Some people are trying to build, I think, like automated stock pickers that'll go out and actually do the buy, and they'll set like what's a price I want to get in at, what's a price I want to get out at, what's a stop loss, and generally those are kind of good ideas, but sometimes though you might incur too many trades with that, and that's maybe fine because trading's pretty much free nowadays. But you could get eaten alive on taxes and things like that, especially if it runs up any, or if you sell. If you buy a stock at 100 and it goes to 105, well, great, you made $5 a share. But then you're out and maybe it jumps up to 120 or 130 or 150 and you just totally missed out on the ride, So anyways, a few other thoughts here just to wrap up. I think I said this a couple times during the presentation, super easy to get overwhelmed in this stuff, but the best thing you can do is just jump in and start playing around with the tools and get familiar with it. It was pretty, once you kind of find the samples, and I've got the links in the slides, that was super helpful for me to start building this stuff and working with it more. But it'll change in 6 months, so don't worry about it. And you can always ask the AI to help you with it. But it might go down a rabbit hole, so beware. One other thing is just in terms of the engineering of it, the agents themselves, especially with the tool calling, I didn't have a demo of the tool calling or anything like that, but you could have had maybe that research report actually have a tool to hey, yeah, I'm really convinced I should go buy this. You could have it go just straight up buy the stock. The agents are probabilistic. You don't really know what they're going to do, and they're trained to know how to call a tool or when to use a tool. But if you have the ability to be deterministic, you should be deterministic. And don't over-engineer anything just to have an agent in there for the sake of having an agent in there. An example I can give of that is I had a medical bill come in not too long, a few months ago, and I went to pay it, and the payment for it was through this chat application, and it was this is the dumbest thing ever. Why would I just give me a form to click a button, and if you want to innovate here, let me use Google Pay or something and not have to type my credit card into this random person on the internet, or this business. Anyways, so it was silly. And then I tried to ask it a question, and it wouldn't answer any questions. It just kept telling me to call support. So it's you weren't even helpful. So it probably wasn't even a real agent underneath the hood. We talked a little bit about breaking your problems down. And if you need multiple agents to do things, like I said earlier, it's kind of like delegating. It's a skill, and you want to be able to delegate those tools out and delegate that work out. And that's a hard thing to figure out and learn. It's a skill that you got to practice at, develop. And then I don't, this AI stuff, it's probably around to stay. It's that bubble's probably not gonna pop. That's my I'll say it right now. It's probably not gonna pop. Now that I've said that, it'll pop. I think it'll actually go. Maybe I think email's a weirdly like similar thing to compare it to, right? Like, or even like Microsoft Office, like it's just a productivity tool, and like everyone's going to have the productivity tool at some point, and we're all just going to use it, and it's just going to be part of it. And you're not going to think like in a generation of people, like you're just not gonna, it's going to be like email. You just like have it, or Slack or something like that. I guess for the new kids, you're just going to have that, and you're not going to really think much of it, and that's just going to be part of your normal workflow routine. So I don't think that bubble is going to necessarily pop because it's going to get embedded into what we do. Oh, you had a question and I totally like blanked on it and walked off.
It's me that the life cycle for the LLM version are so quick to turn over and sunset. How are folks handling having that turnover in their agents? Because then you have like a whole new version. You have to constantly be like, oh, is this one gonna work?
Two thoughts on it. The first one is we talked about the open weight models that are out there, and so those would kind of give you some protection against that in the sense that, hey, I know that I have this model and it's going to stick around and it's not going to all of a sudden be deprecated. I have some assurity because maybe I have a copy of it and I'm running it on my own hardware or something, right? Like that would be a thing. The lift to do that might be more for some than others. So, maybe you're using one of the hosted models like a GPT, like 5.4, I'm using that right now, but in a year from now, is that still going to be around? Probably not. They'll have maybe they'll be on 6 by then or 5.12 or whatever. I would say we talked a little bit about evaluations, and I didn't have any kind of demo or example around that. But that would, I think, be an area where you would want something like that set up to where you can evaluate, hey, here's where I'm at today. And if I make this change, whether it's changing the instruction prompt or maybe even adding a new tool call for the agent, or I'm changing that underlying model that it's calling. Maybe I'm going from 5.4 to maybe I'm going from nano to mini, or maybe I'm going from 5.4 to 5.6 because those just got released in the last week or two. I would want to have that evaluation data set up such that I could say, hey, I got a new version of the agent. Let's run it against the evaluator and see how do we score, where are we at? Does it make an improvement? Do I regress? Those would be the kinds of things to look out for. So, any other thoughts, questions, comments? QR code that I didn't test is right click on Google, it says generate QR code. It's got to work, right? That'll take you to the GitHub repo where you can see all the code to build the app we were just looking at. You can pull it and run it. Well, if you have Foundry, you can run it locally and play with it. And then a link for these slides is actually in the README of that repo, so you can get to these slides as well. So